Alright, so I recently had the privilege of having Aaron and Phoebe on the podcast. It will be in episode 4 of season 3. The video will come out soon. But I wanted to make this video because of this very interesting concept that surfaced itself during the video. And it was the idea of the prisoner's dilemma, the infinite prisoner's dilemma, and how it relates to work ethic. So, if you're not familiar with what the prisoner's dilemma is, it's essentially two prisoners are being interrogated for their crimes, right? They are separate and they're given two choices, either to expose their partner, say that they did it, or to keep quiet and not expose their partner, right? So the scenarios are, if both keep quiet, then both receive only 1 year in jail. If one gets exposed, but the other doesn't, then the one who chooses to expose gets away scot-free, and the other one that doesn't expose gets 10 years in jail. Now, if both of them choose to expose each other, then they both get 5 years in jail. Now, if you look at all the scenarios, right, it makes sense to expose no matter what. So you think about it this way, if prisoner A decides not to expose, then prisoner B, if he doesn't expose, gets 1 year. But if he exposes, gets 0 years. So he should expose the guy. If prisoner A chooses to expose, then if prisoner B doesn't expose, then he gets 10 years in jail. But if he does expose, then he gets 5 years. So it's still lesser if he chooses to expose. Now the problem is, with this rational approach, both will choose to expose, which causes both of them to receive 5 years, rather than getting only 1 year if they have both chosen to keep quiet, right? So that's the prisoner's dilemma. Now, the reason why this links to work, and collaborative work especially, in either the office or project work or in life, essentially, there are two options that you have to do. You can either do a good job or you can do a poor job, right? Let's not talk about mediocre jobs for the sake of argument. So let's say, for example, that your coworker chooses to do a bad job. For you, if you choose to do a good job, it would mean having to cover his ass. It would mean having to pick up after him and do his work, which is more suffering for you, essentially the 10 years of imprisonment. And you would lose out as a result. But if you choose to take revenge as well, then, well, both of you suffer, but you won't suffer as much as if you had to tank everything, right? So it makes more sense to do a bad job. And you can even see a part of yourself wanting to take revenge for the sake of it, like in spite of the guy, right? Just because he's incompetent. So that's the scenario, right? And on the flip side, if your coworker does the job, right? If you choose to be selfish, it's actually beneficial to you because he does the work for you and then you don't really need to do anything. And on the other hand, if you choose to help out, then, well, you have added workload. So the rational approach for yourself is to not do work, no matter what. But you see the problem with this, because now both co-workers choose not to do work and to take revenge on each other in some sense. So it's just, they create hell for each other, essentially. And this is what plays out in offices, which is that you see somebody who's incompetent and then you are tempted to be incompetent yourself or take revenge, and then the reverse is true, and then now both of you just keep fighting and things like that. So the question is, how do you get out of it? And so there's this extended scenario of the prisoner's dilemma, which is the infinite prisoner's dilemma. Now, the infinite prisoner's dilemma states that you have to repeat the prisoner's dilemma with the same person over and over again for infinity. It's like you play the prisoner's dilemma, then after it's over, you have to do it again. You have to do it again, you have to do it again, you have to do it. The question is the rational approach still to expose the guy? Because if you were to expose the guy, you would have to suffer this 5-year-long sentence for infinity. And the way out of the infinite prisoner's dilemma is to make some form of agreement with the other person such that both of your lives are better, right? You know that your lives could be better and you don't want to repeat this for all eternity. So the solution is to show your partner in some way that you are willing to risk your own benefit in order to achieve some long-term peace. So you would say, right now, even though it's not as good for me to not expose you, I would still do it, because in the hopes that you would realize and then reciprocate, and then both of us will not expose each other and we can live a life that has less suffering, right? And this is related to the workplace as well, because at work, you could continue to take revenge on your coworkers and your colleagues, right? You could just keep going down this spiral of I take revenge on you, you take revenge on me, we just don't like each other and we keep going that way. Or you could choose to be a nice guy for a change. Now, what that means is that you will take an L in the short term. You will lose out because he's just going to keep taking revenge on you, but if you decide to change, then you will lose out more for the time being. But if the other party realizes this and sees that you're playing the long game instead, and then changes his ways to cooperate with you instead, then both of you will benefit. Both of you will have the 1-year sentence in the long term rather than the 5-year sentence in the long term, right? So of course I have to caveat here that there are flaws with the system, and the most obvious one is that what happens if the guy doesn't reciprocate? And it's a fair consideration because, and I think that this is why majority of people actually don't dare to, or at least choose not to take the first step to lose out and be the nice guy. Because what if I'm a nice guy forever and then he never ever reciprocates, right? Then I'll just be losing out forever. And fair enough, that's a fair enough consideration. Now, there are two ways that I can think about to, well, make people be nice to each other, essentially. The first, of course, is you could threaten the guy with revenge. So for him, it's definitely worse off for him if you were to go from being a nice guy to taking revenge and doing a bad job, right? So you could say, look, if you're not going to do this, then I'm going to go back to revenge, and then your life will be worse than it currently is now. Or you could do something else if he doesn't want to listen. And this is more of a structural solution, which is to ensure that your suffering causes his suffering, not because you make him suffer, but because you guys are in the same boat. You gotta have a structure whereby if I sink, then you sink too. So it makes sense for you to support me and make sure I don't sink so that you don't sink as well. And so in that sense, you will realize, okay, now even though I'm benefiting in the short term, in the long term, I'm still going to lose out because I'm in the same boat with you. And then he would reciprocate in that way. So that's the kind of mechanism. And to bring this video to a close, the thing I would conclude with is that you have to see working environments, even like interaction with your family, let's say, as a long-term game. Not a single prisoner's dilemma where the rational approach is to take revenge, but the infinite prisoner's dilemma, which the approach is to be the nice guy. So yeah, that's all I have for the video. You can wait for Season 3, Episode 4 to be out soon. Bye bye.